So this is a $4.5 trillion tax cut blueprint. It calls for $2 trillion in cuts to mandatory programs such as Medicaid and food stamps, and would raise the debt ceiling by $4 trillion. This is the first step after if it was adopted by the Senate, then they would have to produce a bill that actually details the cuts. And as long as that bill adheres to the budget, it can pass the Senate with just 50 votes instead of 60. This is called budget reconciliation. It's the way Obamacare was passed. It was the way the Inflation Reduction Act, the green subsidies under Biden were passed. So it was really an achievement for Speaker Mike Johnson. The House Republican conference has been very divided. You have moderates who are very worried about Medicaid cuts. You have conservatives who at the last minute flipped their votes and allowed the bill to the budget to pass, but wanted even deeper cuts. They wanted to see this budget fully pay for itself. But Trump lobbied them and was, in fact, calling them at the last minute to get them to flip in a dramatic scene here last night. So this is a positive. I'll basically say my assumption has been that the Trump tax cuts of 2017 do get extended, but I was thinking it could be more like December, right up against the deadline. This makes it more likely that it happens in May. Will give businesses and individuals a better heads up as far as tax planning. It's just a positive sign for the tax cuts overall.
What are next steps, Eric?
You know, the Senate is not really going to just put this House budget on the floor and pass it. They want to actually make larger tax cuts. They want to basically do something which is assume that the Trump tax cuts, $4 trillion, don't cost anything. This is called a baseline shift. It's very technical, but it would be kind of a budget gimmick. And then add a lot of things like a state tax repeal, fulsome no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, probably trying to make the tax cuts permanent rather than 8 or 9 years, which is what my estimate is of what the House bill would do as far as the individual rate cuts. So they're going to make those changes. There's also more squeamishness among senators for actual spending cuts, such as to Medicaid. So they may bring that down. So I'm expecting substantial changes. There'll be backdoor negotiations. A compromise will emerge, and then we'll see if it can pass both the House and the Senate.
Matt from Westchester writes in and asks, how about the salt tax deduction?
There's some runway to do that, on the House side. But I think that, basically the Senate would have to create more room or they would have to find deeper cuts. Now, there's a lot of options they can do in order to allow for SALT. You could do things on the tax side, make it more difficult to apply for a child tax credit, for example, or do a stock buyback tax increase. But, this is all going to be very controversial and create winners and losers. But certainly there's a group within the House Republican Conference from New York, New Jersey, and California that will not vote for a tax bill without some kind of SALT, tax cap change. Right now, it's limited to $10,000. That applies to a couple as well as an individual. They may double it, allow it to be 20 for a couple. We could see another type of rise. I don't think it's going to be completely uncapped. It just costs too much.
So how hard was it to get this done? Like, how much corralling did President Trump have to do, or were House Republicans relatively united?
It was the House Freedom Caucus is often pinned as being a big obstacle to leadership. They came on early on as long as they got this $2 trillion in cuts. So that's a big chunk of what the conservative, but they're what they call the affiliates, people like Victoria Spartz, Thomas Massey, Tim Burchett, and Warren Davidson, who at the last minute were saying, we are not voting for this. We'll never vote for this. They were really dug in. In fact, there's a scene I've never seen in my almost 20 years up here where they sent everybody home. Lawmakers got into their cars, were leaving the Capitol, and 8 minutes later, they said, everyone come back. So in those minutes, I think President Trump got to some people. They started to flip, and they ended up passing it. But it was a very dramatic scene here. We, in fact, even saw some Democrats coming, one who had just had a baby and one who had just had surgery, coming in with a walker to try to put the pressure on Republicans to get every vote that they needed.